everyone, this is Steven. I'm back again with another review of the DC Collectibles this time. For those of you who are not familiar, DC Collectibles is practically a new name for DC Direct since at least a few years back they changed the name. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about some of the DC Collectibles action figures that were made around the time after the name of the company was changed. So at that time, DC was publishing a series called the New 52. Now, I have not followed that particular comic book, but what I do understand, what's it all about, is practically reimagining all the known heroes such as Justice League and their enemies by changing their appearances, or at least their costumes somewhat. I'm not sure if their origin stories were also modified or not for the new generations, but that was the whole gist of it. So what I'm going to cover today is just a review of the Crime Syndicate. Now, who is the Crime Syndicate? Crime Syndicate is practically evil representations of the Justice League members. They have made several of them into the toy form. These guys are practically, the way I understand, are based on the new concept from the New 52 storylines. And what we're gonna have here, I believe I have the whole set of them, unless I'm missing a figure or two, but what I have is about seven members of the Crime Syndicate. Usually the known members of Crime Syndicate, and according to some stories, they are from a parallel universe where Justice League is evil and all the bad guys are actually good guys. There were some modifications to this story as the different stories came out about Crime Syndicate, but the main point remains that the Justice League in this other alternate Earth is actually evil, and it's trying to inflict as much crime and damage on humanity as they can, because most of them are superpowered. So let's start with the first one that we have here in my collection. This guy is called Ultraman. Now, Ultraman is an evil representation of Superman, except in this case he's called an Ultraman. So you will not expect this guy to be a Boy Scout, quite the opposite. So they're about 6 inches or slightly taller, I believe. Now, they have a lot of articulation, which was quite an improvement for the DC Collectibles compared to the DC Direct days when the articulation was in many figures rather limited. So they kind of pushed the limits of their figures this time around, and I'll show you what I mean. He can lift arms a bit. That's not much of an improvement when it comes to the arms. It's still more or less the same, but he does have articulation in the biceps and in the elbow and in the wrist as well. And the major improvement is the fact that the figures can do a split now, which none of their figures before could actually do. But now they can, roughly that much. So, and of course that he can move his legs forward about that much. And there is articulation pretty much that resembles like the articulation in Marvel Legends. There is articulation in the knees, at the ankles. There is no ankle pivot, however. But the legs can be also moved roughly here by the hip. They can go left and right, except mine is a bit stuck, I'm assuming, because of the paint they applied back then. So I don't like to tag at it too much because he might just break. That's the thing about the DC Collectibles and DC Direct, for those of you who have any figures from that line. The word to the wise, these figures and the DC Direct ones, there's many among them who can be extremely fragile. One of my figures took a die once off a shelf and she clear broke off her head at the neck. I had to super glue it. And then there was a time when I opened the Man-Bat from DC Direct days, and his whole one wing was completely damaged. The same thing happened to the Killer Croc from DC Direct days. When I opened it, his whole arm was broken off already inside the package. So their quality control is a bit questionable, because these figures look very good and very well done, and most of them look amazing in my opinion, but the quality control is still an issue. they can be very fragile when they want to be. From arms breaking off, ankles breaking off, and all sorts of mishaps happening to them. It seems that even a slightest fall can damage them still. So handle with care. That's my only advice. Try not to put it on any tall shelves or anything unless you have a glass door for it. So anyway, going back to Ultraman here, he can tilt his head left to right. He can put it about that much up and then a little bit down as well, then to the left and to the right. And there is ab crunch right in this area here, except mine is a bit stuck again for not moving it much in that area. And yeah, I don't think he has much of an articulation when it comes to the waist, at least not in mine. Oh, there we go. I was wrong. He has movement in the waist as well. Now this style of articulation resembles Marvel Legends in many ways. So I would say they have copied the same recipe from Marvel Legends, and I would say also from DC Universe Classics. So they managed to make them quite a bit articulated. He is a very good representation of Ultraman. He even has a torn cape and a bit burnt at the end from all the fighting, I suppose, and some such. So anyway, that's Ultraman, or the evil version of Superman. The next one, that would be logical, that's right next to him, is Owlman. Now of course Owlman is a evil representation of Batman, or at least in that world. This would be their version of Batman, who is just as smart as the original one and pretty much knows all the same strategies and tactics as the original Batman, but using it for evil purposes instead. He has pretty much the same articulation as Ultraman, and not much is different other than the fact that obviously it's a different character and the costume is different. But again, very well done. And since this is a new 52 version of Owlman, you can tell there is some differences compared to the classic version of Owlman. Most specifically, the mask is different, because the one from the classic version of Owlman has more of a metallic helmet that resembles an owl face, and this one again is a bit different because it's predominantly black and different shape of the helmet altogether. But the idea is the same, so this is an Owlman. I do not have the Crime Syndicate that was released by Mattel in the multi-pack from the DC Universe Classics. I don't have that particular pack to show you how the classic interpretation of the Crime Syndicate looks like. And DC Direct also released many years ago, in 2000s, have released individual members of the Crime Syndicate, again representing them in their classic look. So I don't have those either, but if I ever get a hold of any such, I will be able to show you a comparison between these new 52 versions and the classic ones. So anyway, that's Owlman. And to complete the Trinity, as we would in the regular DC universe, this is a Superwoman, but practically, to make it more clear, this is an evil representation of Wonder Woman. She has a power of flight. She's very well molded, I would say, especially the face and the rest of her. She looks quite menacing, and you can tell she's ready for trouble. Again, articulation remains the same. She can also do a split, as Owlman and Ultraman can. And articulation is, as I said, pretty much the same, except one thing is sort of different. In her case, she has no ab crunch to speak of, and no movement in the waist, but in her torso she has a movement right below her breast, so she can turn left to right. So they put the articulation right below there, so in her mid-torso area she can actually move left to right. So that's the only difference. Now this cape is made of soft rubber, so it doesn't really impede in any kind of way with her body. However, it does limit the movement of the arms, because the arms are right underneath it. But then again, you could slowly move the cape a little bit up, because it's not really glued, it's just kind of thrown over, but you can move it just ever so slightly to be able to maybe move her arms a little bit so that she can at least straighten them up. There you go. So yeah, you can manipulate the cape because it's made of soft rubber, as I said, and it's not glued anywhere. So yeah, so practically in that way the cape is not much of a hindrance. She can still move, so it doesn't create any problem posing her really. So anyway, that's Ultrawoman. I mean, sorry, not Ultrawoman, Superwoman. What am I saying? I got them all mixed up. Next one we have here is Johnny Quick. Johnny Quick is a evil representation of Flash from Justice League, or his evil counterpart. He has also this power of speed, and he can run really fast, but his costume is more futuristic looking, and he has nice bright shiny colors. Again, articulation is the same for most of the Crime Syndicate figures. They all can do a split, and there is quite a bit of articulation in them compared to any older DC figures. So he's very well done. I mean, I have absolutely no complaint about any of these guys because they all look good. And yeah, so that would be Ultraman. According to one of the cartoon movies about the Crime Syndicate, this fellow is supposed to be Australian, or at least his alter ego is all Australian. And so this wouldn't be Bart Allen or anything like that in the alternate universe. It's a completely different person. So there you go. That was Johnny Quick. Now this character here is called Atomica. So this is her in regular size, but she was not released as part of the same series. She was released later on in the DC Collectibles DC Icons series. The figures that are a bit smaller in height than the rest, but just as articulated, I would say, and they come with all sorts of accessories and little pieces and maybe tiny figures. Johnny Quick came with a mini version of Atomica, and she's more like a tiny statue, but I'm joining them together because it is the same character, so I'm putting them on display together. So if you're wondering what is her normal height here compared to some of the members, I'll show you, and you'll see that there is a difference in height, only because the DC Collectible New 52 are bigger in size than the DC Icons here. So here you go. This is the comparison, Johnny Quick and Atomica. So you can tell Johnny Quick is much taller than her. But since she has a power of shrinking and growing, I suppose she could kind of fit. But I'll show you also how she looks like next to Superwoman here. So Superwoman again is much taller than her in every sense of the word. So, but I guess she could still blend in because she is a member of their group, Atomica here. She could kind of blend in, that just consider that she would be smaller obviously than the rest of them. What else to say about her? Yes, in case you're wondering, she's supposed to be an evil representation of Atom from the Justice League, except in this case it's not a man but it's a woman, and she uses her knowledge of shrinking powers and such to commit crimes. And even though she's released under DC Icons, she still has the same articulation as her fellow members. She can do a split. I believe she was meant to be released with the rest of them, but due to some probably unforeseen issues, she was released in a completely separate line. But the articulation is, as I mentioned already, it's pretty much the same, so you're not missing much there. And she has articulation in her torso, just like the Superwoman. And mine is a bit stuck, maybe because I wasn't moving her much in that area. But yeah, and she has some extra hands that she comes with, and except I keep them away from the display, so she can pop her hands. Okay, sorry, I may be wrong about that. No, this particular one does not have the hands removable, so scratch that off. I was wrong about that. She Doesn't come with any extra hands, so you cannot really pull them off or change them like in some of the other DC figures. But anyway, so that was my mistake. I got her mixed up with another character. Anyway, that's Atomica for you guys. Let's move on to the next. We still have 2 more to go. Next one in line is Power Ring. Power Ring is an evil representation of Green Lantern Hal Jordan, his evil counterpart, and his costume looks almost identical to that of Green Lantern, except the symbol is different, and I'm not really sure what this symbol really represents. It's not a lantern, but it's something else. He did come with a very nifty, nasty looking lantern that he uses to recharge his ring, and there it is. Looks like an actual monster skull that he uses to power up his ring with. He can carry it in one of his hands. Just show you how that looks like. Oops. It's not listening to me this time. Let's try this again. There we go. That's his power battery. But it easily falls off though. That's the annoying part. But the lantern has a bit of an articulation because the handle can move, just like in most of the other lantern accessories for the other figures. The articulation is also pretty much the same as in the rest of the Crime Syndicate. And what else to say about him? Other than the fact he's just an evil representation of Green Lantern, with similar powers and some such. And the fact is, I understand he's been a long-standing member of the Crime Syndicate, at least in that alternate Earth. Now, before I finish the conversation with the final member I got here, I want to mention that Crime Syndicate was in a way represented in the Justice League cartoon series, if you guys are familiar with that one, from around early to mid 2000s when it was released. There were 2 series to it. There was the Justice League and the Justice League Unlimited. The group that was known as Justice Lords, which were practically, again, evil representations of the Justice League from a parallel universe who tried to take over the universe where the Justice League lives. I believe that the Justice Lords are practically just another version of Crime Syndicate. Now, why was the Crime Syndicate itself not used with their proper costumes in those cartoon series? I wouldn't be sure about it, but I'm just convinced that the Justice Lords were practically a reinvented interpretation of the Crime Syndicate. There is a cartoon movie on the DVD and Blu-ray that actually covers the topic of the Crime Syndicate, and I believe the movie is called The Crisis on Two Earths. So practically the Justice League ends up facing the Crime Syndicate in their world, and one of the issues that takes place in the storyline, it's involving the Justice League's version of Flash. Or actually, sorry, I may have mixed that up. No, that was from the Justice League cartoon series. Anyway, going back to the Justice League movie about the Crime Syndicate. So it's called the Crisis on Two Earths, I believe that's the title. And the Justice League ends up fighting the Crime Syndicate on their turf, so in their world, because that same Crime Syndicate was planning actually to destroy the Justice League and invade their Earth and take over there as well, because they managed to gain knowledge that there is a Justice League in an alternate universe. So I won't continue further about that DVD, but if you guys have a chance to find it, take a look at it. It's a good story. And going back to the figures, now the final member here, who is based on Firestorm. Now this fellow is not called Firestorm, he's called Deathstorm. And he has a skull for a face, and he's obviously an evil representation of Firestorm. This fellow, I don't know a whole lot about him, or how he came to be. However, I did notice he bears some resemblance to the Ghost Rider from the Marvel. because he has a skull. And of course, with this flame on top of his head, he just reminds me of Ghost Rider a great deal. He's a nifty looking character, and he's also a member of the Crime Syndicate. He has same articulation, so you can expect that he can do a split. He has ab crunch, and he should have a movement in the waist like the other ones. There we go. Mine was again a bit stuck, but yeah, he can move in the waist, in the head as well. He can do a tilt left to right and move the head left to right. And he didn't come with any accessories as far as I know, so he came just like this. And that's about it. So with this one, I would just close the discussion for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this small coverage of the Crime Syndicate and a bit of a short history about him, at least from what I know about him. And that's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll hope to catch you next time again with another review or another show and tell from my collection. Thanks, bye.